1991 300E, hot air for the first 20 minutes of driving. Our next Patreon question today comes from Jimmy in North Hollywood, California. And he has a 1991 300E, and what happens is when he turns the car on and drives it for the first 20 minutes, all he gets is hot air, and then eventually the air conditioning starts to work. Now, Jimmy has an additional problem where the center vents do not blow at all. Again, his center vents don't work, and all of his air comes out of the defrost vents or the side vents. Now, these are two separate issues, and we're going to look at each issue from the perspective of what might be wrong, and then some other possible diagnoses that might not be, that might have not come under consideration. So the hot air issue we can basically limit to three potential items. The first one is that I would strongly advise that somebody with this issue check their fuses, especially their automatic climate control fuse, for the heating water valve. And I think this is either fuse 7 or fuse 9, but I can't remember. This fuse needs to be free of corrosion so it delivers the right amount of voltage through the climate control system. Now, your car, Jimmy, has what's called a monovalve, which is located in the front right, as in passenger side fender. It's a domed valve with a little plug connection on it and a line going in and a line going out. 2 lines, actually. I think it's got 2, but I can't remember. This valve has one job, and its job is to shut off hot water when you want maximum air conditioning. But as time goes on, these valves can fail, or the signal going to them can fail. Now, how do we determine whether we have a problem with the valve or we have a faulty signal to the valve? Well, the valve has a little 2-pin connector, and you can take a voltmeter, which you can buy at Harbor Freight for about $15, unplug the plug, start the engine on the car, turn it on max AC, and then put your voltmeter on DCV20, that's 20 DC volts, and stick it in the 2 pins. You should get battery voltage like 12.5 to 13. If you're not getting 12.5 to 13 volts, it's time to pull your push button control unit out and send it to my buddy Chris Rose at cruisecontrolrepair.com, where for a very reasonable price, Chris will rebuild it for you with new electrolytic capacitors, and of course any broken solder joints that are in there can get repaired. And then you can look at the second part of the problem, which might still be the monovalve. Now, monovalves are expensive, but A, there seem to be a lot of used ones available, and then B, you don't have to necessarily change the whole valve. You could change the solenoid as well. So if you find one from like a low mileage R129, you can actually unscrew the little solenoid off the top and switch it over. These solenoids can fail over time because they're copper wound, causing them to either need a long time to heat up and close the valve, or causing them to never close at all. And because the system works sometimes and not others, I'm going to lean on Jimmy having a bad push button controller and having a mono valve that maybe has a short in it that's causing the board on the push button controller to overheat. So I would still eventually replace that mono valve, but I would lean towards the push button controller, just not knowing what day of the week it is, or the fuse being dirty or corroded. Now, let's talk about the center vents, but before we do that, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about why you should subscribe to this channel. Every week we get at least 2 emails from people telling us that they have helped us resolve irresolvable or difficult to resolve obsolete problems in their classic Mercedes. So for the princely sum of $0, you can add us to our YouTube subscriptions, and you can get all sorts of weird information that nobody ever discusses about classic Mercedes in minute detail, sort of like, maybe we were working on these cars all day or something. We also encourage you to like and share these videos so that people who really need this information can get it, because when people are able to get information about their classic Mercedes, suddenly they seem to keep them for a really long time. So that's our goal here. And if you're a Patreon supporter, then, you know, if you want us to, we'll make a unique video answering your question that will hopefully cover all of the bases. Now, let's go back to Jimmy's car. Jimmy says the center vents don't open, and there are 2 or 3 potential problems here. The first potential problem is that the vacuum connection under the hood has been severed. This connection goes from the intake manifold to 2 yellow check valves that are located just to the rear left of the brake booster, if you're facing the car, inboard of the brake booster. And the vacuum 3-way connector that goes to these often disintegrates, causing them to leak vacuum. The issue might be a little bit more obvious if your economy gauge doesn't respond well to throttle input and leans towards the red zone all the time. Now, another potential problem could be the push button control unit itself. If he's having a problem getting the monovalve to work, could the push button control unit not be supplying power to the vacuum solenoid grid? Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is the most common issue here, and that has to do with all the vacuum actuators in the dashboard failing. There are a total of 2 actuators responsible for directly opening the center vents, and then 3 more actuators that can cause the problem to be exacerbated. So these are the defrost actuator and the recirculation actuators. Unfortunately, on the 124, all of the actuators are genuinely, completely, 100% buried inside the dash, meaning that to get to them, you actually have to replace the dashboard. Now, if the defrost actuator works and shuts, that's a sign that the center vent actuators may actually be bad. And there is a hack for the center vent actuators. You could actually gently and carefully remove the entire center vent pod and remove the center vent air flaps from the inside of the evaporator so that you have manual control only to turn them off. Otherwise, they're on all the time. I don't see anything wrong with this hack unless you're doing it on a really pristine, high quality, low mileage Survivor example. I think that if you have a daily driver, 250,000 mile E-Class, there's nothing wrong with removing the center vents and removing the center air flaps so that you don't need those actuators. But you need to terminate the vacuum supply going to them. So, if you thought this video was helpful, please like, share, and subscribe, and we really appreciate our Patreons. Thank you so much. And Jimmy, keep your 124 on the road. You may want to get a book on the 124 automatic climate control system so that you can better understand how it works. Available on eBay for around $40. Good luck.